get to our guest for today. Our guest for today is a very special person to me, my partner, my moderator for the show, and there's so much that we could talk about in terms of the subject of race and racism. So I just had to bring him on. We could probably talk for 10 hours, but we're just going to do 2. And I'm grateful he's willing and able to do it. And I just want to welcome you to the show for the second time. Luc, welcome to the Contraband Wagon, sir.
Hey, happy to be here, second time already.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Happy to welcome you. So, wow, okay. Let's start with you are the moderator of the Contraband Wagon. Um, why don't you talk a little bit about why you decided to become the moderator, why you decided to get involved with this show?
Yeah, absolutely. It made sense to me. I did learn about myself quite a while ago that I'm a better support, that I am like a full-blown leader. I have qualities of leadership and I can lead in some situations, but there are situations when I can recognize that my skills are better used as supportive. And I was extremely picky with what I can be supporting, right? Because otherwise you just like stretch a little bit thin and then do a lot of things and you don't achieve anything concrete. And it came out after we met each other's at work. It was about the AUP, a tentative of creating a union at WakeTech, kind of. And we ended up like hitting it up because I was like, oh, who's that guy who's just jumping on to be the president? It sounds like he's got what it takes, he's got good ideas, and we discussed about stuff, and we got closer, and I learned about the racism discussion group. I started there first. I saw what it was all about, and I realized, oh, damn, that is something that I can believe in and put myself behind and see it work. And so that vision, once you have that vision about something, you kind of want to do what you can to support a project that is meaningful to you and that is meaningful to the world in which you live, right? It's like you're kind of grasping for things to make you make sense of stuff. And I must say, like, arriving in America, it took a long time to kind of adjust to just the violence of the way people are treated here in general, and especially minorities and immigrants included, myself included. So when you realize all of that and you don't really have a way to deal with it, and then finally there's a way that comes by, and there's a thing that also aligns with my values because I'm not like someone. I mean, you know me, I'm not violent. I don't want to do anything like really violent to people, but I do want to discuss. I do want to get people to change their mind about about things and things I believe in. So yeah, that's what led me to take a chance, on the contraband, and I never regretted it. So jumping on as a moderator was kind of meaningful at first because I'm like, okay, let me just help because I've done that in the past, technical support for association and other stuff in the IT support. So I'm like, I know how to do this. I can do this. It's really valuable because I know many people cannot, and they're just kind of overwhelmed by it. Whereas I'm just like click 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 and it happens. And so I'm like, I can do that. It's not a huge cost to me. It's still a cost, but at least it gets me my feet wet. And then I was just like, oh, wow, that's paying tenfold back, because the conversation I engage in, the content is stimulating, and you can see the impact it has on people that engage with it as well. So it was all around a bonus. So from there, you don't stop.
So you witnessed these situations of dehumanization first, in France playing soccer and refereeing soccer, and then later, in grad school and whatnot, and in your professional career. So, um, where would you see yourself now? Obviously now you're involved in this show, but like, what is your mindset in terms of dealing with the problem of race and racism?
Well, I feel like getting closer. and closer to the root of the issue. And it's getting better. I'm getting a better and better hang of what the problem is. It's not going to be something that you solve by just, it's not like an obvious flaw that people can be told, that's bad, stop doing that. Because it's not something they actually control that much as they think, you know. It's something that has been ingrained, like as you use the term a lot, racialized. White person racialized, black person. We've been all kind of racialized by a system. And it's not like the system is actively doing that racialization in terms of someone being behind the wheels and saying, like, that's what we need to do to make sure black people stay at the bottom. It's like the
Yeah,
addition of,
there's no actual race sorting hat, like Harry Potter.
exactly.
Yeah.
It is more of a underground systemic thing that we all subjected to by that is the emergent property of each of our individual actions. And when I started to think about it along those terms, like with emergent property and systems of, I mean, really along the lines of what I know, biology and evolution, understanding how socially this develops, while you realize that you have to fight it the same way. You have to get at the root of it by just starting to deconstruct how each one of us has been uh, racialized, and that goes through conversation. And then with that, it doesn't mean you're not fighting the system. That doesn't mean you're not trying to do. We should still do everything in our power to just right those wrongs in a larger scale, like reparation, affirmative action, trying to do things that are concretely and immediately doing something to help the people who weren't helped for so long. But at the same time, if we want to perennize that, we need to make sure we change hearts, which we make people realize, hey, it's not you who's a bad person. You've been manipulated, and it's your choice to stop that and start growing. It's be different. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. I've seen it, so many times happen with people that I don't even know that well. But then I've seen it with you, with people I care really a lot about, with people that are closer to me and a little bit less close, but still at work. I get colleagues that are black at work, and I notice their treatment, I notice how they're treated, and I just talk to them about it. And once you listen to the way people, because I have that I'm an immigrant, so it allows them to extend a trust because they're just like, okay, he's not born here. He hasn't been like tainted by the system as much. So maybe, and he gets it, he's also oppressed in terms of immigration. So yes, I do have a cheap card in my way to get to people that are oppressed. But at the same time, I don't use superpower. I just listen. It's not that hard. You just ask people a question and I just say like, well, how do you feel about this? It seems shitty and I'm sorry that happened. And then they tell you. And then they start talking, and then you reaffirm their feelings, like exactly what you do with your friends when they tell you something shitty happened to them. It's really not magical. We all do it all the time, and that gets you to understand their position. But it's something so pernicious about racism in America. There's something I never told you, like that I wanted to talk to you about tonight. The fact that, I mean, you know me, I'm like really good at playing devil's advocate, and I'm really good at empathy. And sometimes it really hard is hard because my brain goes first reaction to that excuse, So let's take an example when you tell me about something that happened and that's like a traumatic event or racism that happened to you. I kid you not, my brain, I know how my brain functions because I've always done the devil's advocate to myself, including myself, and when I think something, I'm right away trying to be like, boom, let's flip it around and let's think, what if I'm wrong and what if they're right? So when you tell me a story about that, about an event that happened, I kid you not, my first reaction is like, is he making this up? And that pops like right away in my brain. It's so impressive. It just burst out. And every time I hear that voice that pops right out, I'm like, okay, brain, cool. Okay, society, fine. But then, you you are people are the filters of those thoughts. We're not responsible for what our brains come up. There are so many influences on it, so many things that try to get our attention and try to get to think get us to think a certain way. What we are is the person listening to all that brouhaha, all of those things that try to pull our attention left and right, and we're the person who says, "Hey, that I care about." So I'm always able to recenter, and I put myself in the danger zone because I am really good at devil's advocate and empathy. So I literally empathize with a person you're telling me that just abused you or like told you something bad. And sometimes I have to be like, okay, look, that you're doing the work to try to understand the perspective of an asshole. It doesn't mean the asshole is right. Your brain is just imagining all those things. Now you decide how you want to feel about the situation. And of course, it's not a hard decision, but it just it speaks volumes to the capacity of the rationalization process to influence us, despite the fact that we're aware of it. Being aware of it doesn't make it easier to deal with the influence. And that's something that we need to make people realize. It's like we're not telling you, hey, this is a secret. Like you just racist, take a pill. You will feel better. Change this and then all will be okay. No, you're gonna struggle all your life. And guess what? Black people is gonna struggle too. Mexicans gonna struggle too. Asians gonna struggle too because guess what? They've been racialized too, and with the oppression they felt, they probably harbor a lot of resentments they're gonna have to deal with. They also have biases. Everyone deals with this on all levels. It's not like there is one way to be good, and it's either you be that or you're not, and it's easy to be. No, being good, doing the right thing, following the moral we decide is good at the moment in the society in which we're living, is hard work. Like if you think being married is hard work, try being good in society. It's harder. It's harder than being. You have to be married to the entire country. It's like it's work constantly that you have to compromise the other's positions, take positions without being insulting to people or getting into their face ad hominem. It's a lot of work, and you're allowed to not always want to do it. What you're not allowed to is bail on the work completely and say I don't want to do it. Because when I see people completely bail on it, I'm always like, well, I'm struggling here too with that. I'm not. It's not easy for me either to be nice to people every time, all the time, every day. It sometimes I don't want to be nice, but I'm forcing myself because I would like other people when they don't feel like being nice to force themselves too. I want a society when it doesn't matter if you feel shitty. Sometimes you cannot hold it, and that's okay. You just have to be kind to yourself, but you need to make the effort. You cannot just be like, I don't want to be nice, and you all have to be nice to me. Like, no, man, no, that's not how society works. So are you dealing with anything like that, like in your brain, when you're talking to someone, like maybe not in your conversation, but because you want to keep that a little bit of magic sauce hidden, but when you think about a Twitter conversation, I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I want you to talk about it. Like, how do you have the same type of restraint that sometimes you're just like, oh my god?
Oh man, okay, what a question. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. Do thoughts pop up in my brain like every other human? They certainly do. Do some of those thoughts contain meanness? Absolutely they do. I'd even say some of those thoughts contain evil. And it's exactly what you said. What do? You evaluate them, right? You get to a point where you're, instead of going on autopilot, right, and whatever like monkey thoughts are popping into your brain, you don't just parrot them out. You consider. You said it's knowing that you're not your thoughts, right? And that you do have control over this. It doesn't make it easier, but I don't know about that. I think it does make it easier to deal with. And I think the reason, at least for me, it does. And I'll tell you why. Because it's this idea of your intention acting as a funnel for your thoughts.
Mm.
So if you set a strong enough intention for yourself, then the thoughts that pop up, anything that's not within that sphere of intention that you've set, it's much easier to get it to fall away. What I find is that people who are having difficulty with that have not set very many intentions, if any, for themselves. Mostly their intentions are set by other people and they're just following. And that's kind of how they live their life. And you're encouraged to live that way in America, right? Like you should
Oh
be
yeah.
grateful for someone giving you a job. You should, like, why are you complaining about not being paid a minimum wage? Like, you're lucky you have healthcare whatsoever. Like it's you're trained into this mindset of thinking that it's both that you should be striving for more, but also if you want more and you're outwardly expressing that, you're ungrateful. It's this kind of weird hypocrisy. And it confuses people, and it gives people decision fatigue and intention fatigue, perhaps. Um, and then there's the issue of capitalism, you know, and I mean, I started thinking about money a long time ago critically when I was a child, and I had all these thoughts about it, just being like, I see what people are doing, right? I see that people are going so hard after getting money. I was trying to set themselves up to get money, this and that. I never felt any kind of inclination to do that whatsoever, ever. And I still don't, and it's still very difficult for me to wrap my head around. The way that I've kind of gone around it at this point is I see money as a means to an end, right? Like, I understand its use, right? I understand it. So, that's how I think about it. But as far as desire or like something related to that, it's mostly related to just, freedom, and having the freedom to be able to act, which capitalism takes away a lot, or virtually takes it. So, I think that, like, for me, yeah, those thoughts pop up, but because I've sent strong intentions for myself, I don't really have to deal as much with shooing those thoughts away. They just kind of fall away on their own. And everything that fits within the sphere of intention kind of flows through to the center, like a focus point. So
I
that's,
can see that. I can see that. Yeah, I can definitely say that similarly. I do have. I don't think I call that intention, but it's like decision for. I don't even think about it. I never named it. I just always had a conscious thought of what do I want, you know, and I always kind of took the time to reflect, to think about it a little bit more than just going on automatic pilot through my days. Just being like, what do I want to achieve today? When I'm in bed and I wake up, I'm usually, and I get to go prepare breakfast and make coffee, I'm always, okay, what are we doing today? Those are the plans. That's where I'm going. That's what I'm teaching. Then I have this meeting. Then I go home. Like, do I want to have a nice evening with you? Do I want to just go on a walk? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I choose. So then, when I have that plan, it's not so much more like things are happening to me. It's more like I'm choosing what's happening. And I think similarly about my thoughts, and I think similarly about my life in general. I'm a big adept of reflection, as you know, like I have my students do that every week. They have to reflect, and it's not necessarily on what we teach, it's on life in general. I'm really into this. I'm really reflecting on what have I done lately. Am I okay with the direction it's going, and how do I want to adjust? Why would I like to adjust that? So I'm like, you know, setting directions, as you said, like setting intentions. I guess that's a good word for it. I'll steal that. I like it, and that is essential, as you mentioned, because I never thought about it as something that makes it easy. Like that image of a funnel is great. I love it. And I like to think the funnel is almost like a sieve because sometimes I'm okay with having ideas going in and out, like readjusting what I think. And then, yes, at the end, something filters out and, uh, that's whatever happens. But it's true that the more consciously am I exploring and setting, like setting intentions, the easier it is to just have those really awful, evil thoughts popping up and being like, yeah, well, that's dumb, you know. I used to have to wrestle with it. Like, man, I used to have dreams when I was really young. I would dream alive, dream awake. So, I would sit in bed before going to bed. I would love to dream and dream a lot. Like, I would just think of myself as flying. I would just go in superhero shit, and I would always kick the crap out of people, just kill people in my thoughts. And that was so for the longest time it was so hard to contain because then I would just have someone annoying me somewhere and I would have those thoughts popping up because you kind of set the intention of like you would like to do that and it hasn't happened I'm someone who just says something and I do it. So at some point I said I will never ever dream about the future again in terms of like crazy superhero shit. That's not real. I will always conceptualize the future into realness. and I can always reimagine the past into superhero shit because that's fun, that's okay. It already happened. I can reimagine. Oh, what would have happened if I had lasers for eyes? And just go for that, and then the aliens show up. Crazy stuff. But the future has to be anchored in realness. So as soon as I decided that, boom, I didn't have to deal with any thoughts like that. I became a pacifist just like that. It just happened because I just set the intention of saying like, yeah, that's not happening anymore. I'm not harboring those feelings. I hate having to harbor hate in my heart about other people. I just don't see the usefulness. He would just eat me. So yeah,
And
setting attention in.
think about the depth of that decision, right? That's really a foundational type decision that's going to impact all your
Oh yeah,
thoughts, it's going to impact all your actions, right? And so as soon as you deal and make a decision at that level, it is an immediate effect, a cascading effect that changes everything you think right away, instantly.
yes.
Yeah.
And the thing that's super interesting about setting intentions that are really intense, I would say, is that then you are compelled to maintain them because you realize that if you don't, they mean nothing. Like as soon as you're just not maintaining it even once, I mean, I at the same time, I'm a proponent of being kind to oneself and being like willing to just work through the mistakes, and that's okay. But there are strong intentions like that for it, like that. That would, I think, if I ever engage into an act of violence and kill someone, that would actually just probably destroy my psyche because I've set such a strong intention of not doing that, of being a pacifist, of refusing act of violence. So yes, that's you refine that. Did I stumble along the way? Yes, certainly. Did I have overthoughts? Yeah, it happened. But it's just at some point it's so anchored that it's part of you, and it's actually creating. It feels being in control of who you are because you are deciding who you want to be, and it's not just like saying, "Oh, I want to be that." It's you have done this over and over again every day for years. You have constructed a persona that you want to be, and at some point, yeah, it is that. Like that's what I mean by like you are your filters. When you start putting a filter on, and you start saying, "I'm going to be nice," because in my life I had an ex-wife. I had like moments when I was not as positive and stuff. And when you start putting after the divorce, I decided to put in a filter that says, "No, now on, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be nice outwardly to people. I'm always going to start there. I'm always going to be supportive, not being gullible, just being nice to people." And at first, it feels like you're a little bit fraud about it because you have thoughts that pop and you're just like, wait, am I really nice if I think those things? And then little by little, as you set that intentions and it makes it easier and easier. And at some point, you're just like, oh wow. And that's really when the realization came by that yeah, you are your filters and you can change them and you will change who you are because there's no other stuff. There's no other thing in the background that's like the true you. That's bullcrap. The true you is built every day. Is who you are, who you act, and what you do. So every time I hear like the self help and people who say like you just have to find who you are, explore yourself and stuff like no, build who you are. Explore who do you want to be. Don't explore who is the inside of you and you want to reveal it. No, who do you want to be? Build on that. That there's nothing. It's just what you decide inside of you. And yes, if you don't decide, if you don't set intentions, they will be set for you. You won't have a choice because you are bombarded by subliminal messages in advertisement. You are bombarded by not so subliminal messages in politics and advertisement. And all those things will seep in. And if you don't actively and consciously think about your life, you will just become what you see and what you hear. And I'm not what I see and what I hear. Otherwise, honestly, in this country, I would just be a racist if I were just what I see and what I hear. That's what I would be because that's what they show you all the time, constantly. They get something out of you or they don't. I think there was key stories that in the situation, like, and you identify that, like the person who turned around when they shouldn't have, the person who you just jive with about for like forever and he continued more than the 5 minutes. They were getting something out, but you were getting something too. It was an exchange. So when it's an exchange, I wouldn't just be putting that on the same level, and I don't think you were on the same level as cheering for the swimming competition. That is just them taking something out of you, and you're not even part of that equation. Literally, like if they just you did it, that's great. You're gonna be celebrated that moment, but then you're gonna be forgotten, right? I don't think those people forgot who you were. Like the people, like the guy who just listened to music all day and it was just bad until you played it, or the guy you played a solo improvisation on jazz 12 bars. All of like I would put those things on different things because when there is an exchange, it's completely different. But when you mention the glaring of all the chairs that gave you like stage fright, right? Uh, that moment here, I must say, like it is an impressive. It speaks to me to the point at which the other people that were there and looking at you with those eyes have not made the decision to do that. Like that's what I was talking about before. Like they didn't actually make a decision. They just let the autopilot take over.
Oh yeah, it was
And
100% like a natural instinctual reaction. 100%.
yeah, it's not like they were thinking. Like you can tell sometimes people like I don't like that expression because we just talked about true self, but like let their true self show. It's like it's an expression that I'm using, not the value of true self behind it. But yeah, it's almost like they let the autopilot show, and that is not them. That is what society has told them to think. And I know it because going back to what we were talking about before, and the thing I told you that I never talked to you about is like I have those thoughts too. The first thing that happens when a piece of news comes by, and there's a black man that's successful or an immigrant that's doing something well, I literally have something that pops in my head, a like thought that just says like, oh, affirmative action, something happened, someone gave him a leg up, like you literally because you hear it every time, all the time, like it's not even that you think that is when you are engaged in politics and trying to think critically about those things like I think I am and I'm trying to, you get exposed to the opinion from other the side that is just putting out that rhetoric, and so it is influencing you. Like this is a thing you cannot prevent. It is getting to you, and then it will show itself. Does it mean it's you? No, it just means you're exposed to it. I think someone who doesn't have negative thoughts is someone who lives in a society without them. And it's not a human one. A human society has negative, positive, mild thought. It's like we have all the gamut. So we shouldn't try to eradicate racism. We shouldn't try to eradicate the issues that come from our failures. We should try to mitigate them. We should try to be conscious of the fact that they exist. Because if we do that, it doesn't matter who is the minority. We'll always be looking for those imposing thoughts or those thoughts that have been constructed from our societal interactions and say, like, nope, we decide to live differently. We decide we do things differently. And it's so wild that people don't realize we've done that before. And we're doing it now. Like each society is different. Empires have collapsed and they were living differently. Empires from other continents have done also things that were completely wild and different. And nobody at the time was just like thinking there would be a different way to live. Literally. I like to tell that story about the I'm European and that example is the Roman Empire when the aqueduct was brought and the firms were brought to the vast regions of the empire. People never thought they would never have running water at some point. They never thought they never had firms. And then the Roman Empire crumbled, and for many reasons, history. Everything away from Italia, aqueduct down, therms down, and it was called the Middle Ages. It was the Dark Ages. Literally, like running water gone, no therms, no baths. People stopped being clean. Like technology receded. And if you ask people nowadays, will you ever live in a world without the internet, without that communication, without the technology we have? Oh no, we're just gonna keep going. And I'm just like, yeah, but there's no. We could maybe, but there's no certainty. Like it happened before, and the Roman Empire is just one example. There are giant empires in Africa with someone that was the richest man on earth that ever existed, and now they don't have a richness clearly anymore, right? The richest man that ever existed, richer than Bezos and Elon Musk together nowadays, was an African king. Now is the Africa is not that rich anymore, right? So it happened all over the place. Asian empires of China and Japan. You have South American empires that also like were extremely rich in gold. You know what happened to that. And so those things happen. Societies have set different set of values, have decided on different sets of values throughout the ages. We are capable of creating a society with different values. We can just
When I told people that I want to, stop racism, they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." Like racism is forever. It's eternal.
that doesn't make sense to me. People who say that, I think it's a lack of imagination because I can already like devil's advocate brain. It's a lack of imagination too to think you can solve climate change, right? Like, no, it's not. We like the technological scaling up that we need to be able to solve climate change reasonably is so vast that it's not happening. We are nowhere near to terraforming, and that's where we need to be able to solve what's about to happen. Terraforming. We're talking about climatic weather cells at the scale of continents, of controlling weather, of controlling where water goes, controlling where carbon goes, nitrogen, phosphorus, all of those, like, and being able to artificially build mountains, artificially fill ocean, or control salinity of an ocean. We're talking about stuff, guys. It's not a pool. Like, we can barely maintain aquarium tanks for giant creatures that we keep in there and make them happy. Like, we not keep doing that with the ocean, guys. We barely know what's in there anyway. So this is outside of our realm. However, racism, that's human nature. We have had 100,000 years of studying human nature with the best tool and the best technology that ever existed to do so. There is no better technology, there never will be the better technology to study human nature than what we have had since the start. Brain, us, like literally. So we don't need a technological jump to solve racism. We don't need something we're missing. And that's the key difference between those two crises. That's why people who say racism is unsolvable, they just don't realize we have the tools. It's us. Like, there's nothing beyond. Racism is not something beyond us. Climate change is. It's way beyond us, beyond human beings on this planet. It's like the entire biosphere.
When I told people that I want to, stop racism, they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." Like racism is forever. It's eternal.
That doesn't make sense to me. People who say that, I think it's a lack of imagination because I can already like devil's advocate brain. It's a lack of imagination too to think you can solve climate change, right? Like, no, it's not. We like the technological scaling up that we need to be able to solve climate change reasonably is so vast that it's not happening. We are nowhere near to terraforming, and that's where we need to be able to solve what's about to happen. Terraforming. We're talking about climatic weather cells at the scale of continents, of controlling weather, of controlling where water goes, controlling where carbon goes, nitrogen, phosphorus, all of those, like, and being able to artificially build mountains, artificially fill ocean, or control salinity of an ocean. We're talking about stuff, guys. It's not a pool. Like, we can barely maintain aquarium tanks for giant creatures that we keep in there and make them happy. Like, we not keep doing that with the ocean, guys. We barely know what's in there anyway. So this is outside of our realm. However, racism, that's human nature. We have had 100,000 years of studying human nature with the best tool and the best technology that ever existed to do so. There is no better technology, there never will be the better technology to study human nature than what we have had since the start. Brain, us, like literally. So we don't need a technological jump to solve racism. We don't need something we're missing. And that's the key difference between those two crises. That's why people who say racism is unsolvable, they just don't realize we have the tools. It's us. Like, there's nothing beyond. Racism is not something beyond us. Climate change is. It's way beyond us, beyond human beings on this planet. It's like the entire biosphere.
It's just reality. Like like for me, it's just in reality we're all humans worthy of human dignity. And that's all there is to it. I just act like that is true. Like so
Yeah.
like it's not to me like an approach of like coming to people and like thinking about if I approach them this way, then maybe they'll do this, maybe this. It's like literally I just choose to
But
see
Will,
people as the
isn't that
humans they
isn't that
actually
sta-
are.
i- isn't that I'm going to use your own words back at you. Isn't that stemming for you setting the intentions early on? You may have set them really early, but you weren't born treating people humanly. You set the intentions to do so, and little by little, it became so second nature that you don't even see doing differently. But you just had a really early start on doing those things for many different reasons that you mentioned here. But like it's important to make that sure. Like it's not like you are different. You're only different in the sense of you just had to do it early for X, Y, or Z, right? But that's a key here factor is anybody can start setting intentions. And as soon as you do that, it's going to little by little become more and more easier and easier. And before you know it, you won't even perceive a different way to act. It's just who you became. Because when I was hearing you saying what you just said, I was just like, well, like it sounds like he's saying he's built different. But I mean, I know you may not be saying that, but it's just I wanted to clarify because it's super important.
No, yeah,
You just
yeah.
you just you
No, I
just
mean,
early on did that.
I'm glad that you clarified. Absolutely, man. I mean, I'll give you an example from my childhood, not related to race, to just let people understand that I'm not saying I'm built different. I go through this stuff too. I went through all this. Exactly. I did go through it just at a very young age, like you said. Another time I went through it. I'm at my first birthday party ever. My first sleepover ever. I wasn't somebody who had friends. I didn't go over to people's houses. I didn't have that kind of upbringing. My neighborhoods weren't safe. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. My parents kind of kept us sheltered and inside. And then we moved to the white neighborhood. I moved to I went to the different school. I made my first real friend in 6th grade, and I got invited to a birthday party. And I go there, and we are playing basketball in a hoop in the driveway, and we're playing shirts and no shirts. Now, I am a gymnast, a child gymnast. I am built as like a young kid, but I have no concept of my body. I didn't have a self image about my body as being built. So I didn't really think about it. And when I was no shirts, obviously, like you could see, like I had pretty big pecs for like a young kid, and they were making fun of me, like saying I had boobs and stuff. And I didn't know enough about what was going on, like the social situation or anything like that. I was totally clueless. I couldn't even tell that they were making fun of me. It took me about 10 minutes to realize. And then once I did realize, I obviously was able to like reflect and trace it all back. And then I was like, oh, wow, like this happened. This was like literally happened to me and I had no idea, you
Mm.
know? Very disappointing reflection and scary reflection, right? But what was my reaction to that reflection? Well, clearly I need to learn more about social interaction, about social cues, about, you know, relationships between people. So instead of like harboring resentment against those kids, because they made fun of me, and kids can be relentless, right? And ruthless. But like for me, turning to animus against them was not even an option. I didn't even consider it. It did not
Mm.
even come up as a thought in my mind. So that is the foundation I had built early on. That didn't even come up. What the intention was for me was to always learn and to always grow from a young age. I loved it. I was always a curious kid. I was always wanted to know more. And so this was no different. Even though I was involved, even though I got hurt, even though I was sad, none of that changed that core, which is my curiosity, which is
Yeah.
my desire to learn and grow. And yeah, that was fostered early on. Um,
Yeah, parents.
yeah, my parents, exactly. Learning at home, going to the library, reading books. Yeah.
Dude, my mom did that and my dad did that too when I was younger. My parents, the same thing. And you're right, it did also sometimes bite back. Like sometimes I was asking too many questions, people would make fun of me because it's like, oh, you're the why person, why? Just shut up and stop asking why. Or when you make mistakes because, oh, you think you know everything. No, I was just asking questions about everything. But it sometimes bites back. But yeah, my mother and father always fostered these feelings. Like I can always, I told my mom that last time I was in France, like, it's like she had a dictionary, a giant one, French dictionary. And every time we ask something about a word, she would be like, let's pick up the dictionary and look it up. And we just open the dictionary, go look for the word. Because my mom, like when we started to be in school, she's not far from dumb. She's just not like she was a medical secretary. She wasn't educated. So when we started to ask some stuff, she realized she didn't know. So she just had a dictionary. And turns out it's what the parents did too. And so we look things up. Like she always had like binoculars and we look at birds in the backyard. So my dad was always in the garden, so he would always say like this, like look at life and all. Like the whole reason why I'm a biologist, I know exactly why. I always spend all my time outside with my dad and my great uncle, and we'll do many things outside. So it's fostering that culture of asking questions, figuring things out, being like a little bit of a débrouillard, as we say in French, which means like you just figure it out. So, my dad was like tinkering all the time with stuff, trying to fix things and make things work with what they had. So, like trying to always save resources, be careful, all of those things that it's not things you're born with, it's things that your environment builds. That's why it's so important that we build a correct environment for children nowadays in society. And that's why it's so maddening when people blame individuals for actions. Although I want individual accountability for actions when you do something bad, that's for sure. But you cannot be like it reflects poorly on you because I'm just like that person. I've seen that all their life, a certain type of life that has been printed on them, and then you telling them like why are you burning cars when you're like 15 years old in a banlieue of like France, French countryside, and well, look back at their lives. Look back at what they had. Look back at what the society imposed on them all along. And then it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it certainly explains it a lot. And then that should actually be as much a moment for us to become with, okay, we need accountability for that person, but what we really need is helping them. And we need to start helping ourselves, to stop doing what we've been doing to all those people. Because as soon as I understood that who I was and where I was in life was thanks to my upbringing and other people's input in my life and investment into me, I realized that all the lacks that we see and all the problem we see in society is due to the lack of investment in people, of investment in their own worth. It's like I don't know why. It was just immediately obvious to myself that people are what you invest in them because that's who I am. And as soon as I realized that, I was just like, that's the solution to everything. Like, why aren't people talking more about that? Why aren't we talking about pouring money into those neighbors? Why are we saying it's a bad thing? Why are we saying helping people that have been oppressed and discriminated is not good and we're wasting money on them? Like, why are we saying they should pull themselves out their bootstrap? Like, why? It makes absolutely no sense as soon as you realize how a human being is made, how a human being is cultivated and grown. It's just, it's part of a culture in this country and in Occidental society in general to have a myth of the 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 like genius, people being made alone, be people being a certain way and better than others. That myth is pernicious because not only does it make people who are true evil in capitalism, aka the ultra rich, as people who are just to be revered as having different capabilities than we do. But it also pays. It's just awful because on the way back, it also says like the only reason why poor people have it hard is out because of them. It explains everything by intrinsic values when intrinsic values is so minimum. Minimum. It's I talk about this all the time in the context of biology. There's a nature versus nurture, and many people talk about the nature of people, that is the core foundational stuff. Yeah, of course they want to focus on that. It's so much easier than to look at the nurture thing because you have control over the nurture thing. Because now you're responsible. If you start looking at the nurture part of people, you are responsible for what's happening because you are nurturing your surrounding. You are nurturing your city, you are nurturing your neighborhood, you are nurturing all those things. And when you're stealing resources from other places for the benefit of your community, you are nurturing them negatively. All of those things in like they will reflect poorly on us and we'll have to look in the mirror. So it's so much easier to just be like, it's just a nature thing, guys. They're just not built like us. They're just different. And this is such an easy and lazy intellectual way to do things. But hey, once again, this is also something that was built into people, but laziness intellectually. I'm not blaming people for being lazy intellectuals. It was cultivated. It's also something we've grown. We've made sure they had, you know. This is a cultural and collective responsibilities. I by no means separate myself from anybody else into change being part of the problem, but also I'm by no means separating others from being part of the solution.